Hyksos connection, exposing the Moses-Akhenaten connection, and exposing the whole biblical equals Mesopotamian, Babylonian connection. And they were self-published. A lot of these people were either self-published or close to self-publishing. And then out of the blue comes mega Lawrence Gardner with his heavy-duty, hardback, glossy, beautiful, highly published books on basically the same material. And they pushed this in the media. That alerts me, because his content, his information was not different than any of these other people. In fact, I would recommend a book by William Bramley called Gods of Eden that far exceeds what Gardner ever came upon. And yet that's a little nothing book that, even though it was a bestseller in its time, basically fell off the map. But from a content point of view, that book was already written before Gardner's Grail stuff came out big time. So I think that what happened is the establishment, again, got worried because they realized that mavericks, who are unassociated people, were writing all of this stuff and blowing the lid off the whole Mary Magdalene, René de la Chateau, all of that what comes under the heading of the Grail theories, was being blown away. The Pickets and Princes and so many others I could mention were coming out of the woodwork. So they had to move. They have to co-opt it. But you'll know by dating it. Always look at chronology. When did this book come out? When did the next one come out? And then that can often lead you to the true facts. Mustafa Skadala's books are blinking self-published, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
Ahmed Osman is a little bit more mainstream, but people like Ralph Ellis are small little publishers, that could easily be not even known.
Yeah, Ralph Ellis. I mean, I like his work as well. It's got a lot of crossover with
unbelievable stuff.
The stuff that Mark talks about as well, with in relation to the Jesus being of the pharaonic line, last king of the pharaohs, and he was a very wealthy guy, that type of stuff.
Yep.
And I know you were both at the ARC convention, weren't you, as well?
Oh, yeah. And the previous one at the Beyond Knowledge, we were there as well talking.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's an expert on Josephus. If people want to know about Josephus, remember those 19 Jesuses I was talking about?
Absolutely.
Well, Ellis is the man who deals with that. Ellis's greatest discovery in my eyes is the discovery that St. Paul, who wrote the epistles and the works of St. Paul, Corinthians, basically the New Testament, St. Paul, the man who basically created the story of Jesus that we know, was none other than Josephus Piso.
Absolutely, yeah. We listened to a presentation from Mark about that up at in Newcastle. So there's a lot of crossover. And
Oh yeah. Well, my God, do you know how important that is when you go further and you say that this Piso was the adopted son of the Caesars? His name was Flavius Piso. Copernicus, he was connected to the most powerful, what I call Atonists.
Right, yeah.
He was a spokesman for them. So one theorist connects with another. That's what's so important, taking these gems and moving with it. And not getting into ego and bickering and he said, I said, you said, you're first, you're second, which is so many emails I get, so much palaver about, well, you don't agree with David Icke on this and he doesn't agree with you on that. Yeah, so what? Go over and find some blinking blog where you can talk all about that. It's got nothing to do with what we're doing, all right? It's up to you, the reader, to learn all of the stuff that we're all dealing and then come to your own. Oh, my God, don't say that, Michael. We're not meant to use our brains. We're not meant to come to our own conclusions. You're meant to do it all for us. You're meant to be the big leader.
Exactly.
Oh, sorry, there are no shortcuts, people have to take, and a bit.
You have to go through a bit of suffering if you want the answers.
Yeah. Oh my God, in school, don't they let you do that? They don't all teach all the same. You gotta go from this class to this class to this class. You gotta walk down the corridor, geography, mathematics, art. Wait a minute, in a school, that's the way it is. Well, what's different when you leave that and then you go in to study all of these different people? But the thing that I always emphasize to people is make it an adventure. Make it something pleasant, not paranoid.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Don't make it fear-based. Well, I've even gone so far as to say that this is actually sacred ground. I said that you're talking about the Bath conference. I made that point very clear. You are on holy ground when you're studying this information, so don't come to it with fear. This is the greatest days of your life. I said that in the Taroscopes tour as well. These are the greatest days of your life where this knowledge is now going to visit your consciousness. That distinguishes you. It makes you morally superior. Oh my God, Michael, don't use that word. Yeah, well, guess what? The talismanic word equality is the most misused, meaningless word in the human language, is the word equality. Nobody even knows how to define it, even those who came up with the blinking term. And I can tell you one thing, it has no validity at all. There is no such thing as equality anywhere, any shape, and especially not morally or spiritually. The intellectually empowered man is vastly superior to his brothers because he's got immunity, like we were talking with Mark earlier. He has the immunity He can no longer be deceived because he's done the homework. He's making himself immune every single day by doing this homework. It's not about the we, the us, and the our. It's about you making yourself immune to deception, the webs of deception. What could you think is more important on this planet to do than that?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I put it better myself.
Yeah, that's true. Completely. Again, it's a crossover about when we were talking about people have to make their own path. You know, they have to follow the heart. They shouldn't be looking for external answers because most of them are within anyway.
Right. The external world plays a part, but that can't be the stimuli of the world. Can't be your main raison d'etre for existing. Then you're just a sheep in the field, and you will be fleeced. Your purpose on this, like we said at the beginning intro of Architects of Control. You know, I said it pertaining to myself, but it was basically the overarching theme of the entire present. Why am I? It's those age-old philosophical questions. How did I get here? Where am I? What's my purpose and where am I going? This is going to be with mankind forever. It's been with the people of the past and it's been with the future. And like David Icke says, there's people who don't want to leave that little square. They'll never ask that. That's why I say I'm not in any delusion. I know that that's too painful for most people to ask. I knew that when I was 16. So I have no doubt about it that this knowledge, or at least the knowledge I do, if I confine it to just my own work, is not for everyone. I get tired typing that to people. It's not for everybody.
That's it. Incidentally, you mentioned when you mentioned the introduction at the Bath conference, when I had Karen Sawyer on the show a few weeks back, I think it was 20 or 30 minutes that you spoke, and I edited that down into about 10, 11 minutes, and it was very, very difficult because it was I thought it was a really powerful message. So I would recommend anyone listening to search YouTube for, obviously, Michael Tsarion and Ark Convention. And watch that, because I played that over the radio before my interview with Karen, because we both thought it was such an important message that people need to get out there.
Well, I heard the interview. I heard the interview you did with her and the edited intro as well. Thank you very much for that. And people can actually see the whole thing if they go to the What's New page of my forum. Or just go over to YouTube, MSAR TV. I've got the whole thing there as well.
Fantastic. And what we were going to lead into earlier, which we can briefly cover, was the Patrick McGowan and the symbolism behind the prisoner. And if you want to briefly say something on that one.
Oh my God, that's so incredibly deep. I mean, he was a man who very much, again, well, let's look at one thing. The whole thing was basically about the individual versus the collective, which again brings you into the realm of philosophy and psychology. The symbolism at the beginning, they show his face being crossed off with a bunch of X's. That's purely symbolic about the crossed man, the quartered man, or even the crucified man, which is a very big symbolism of not only being feminized, because Y and X chromosomes. So you have the symbolism of feminizing. It's very important what that represents. He's being marked off the grid. You can interpret that as a maritime thing, or he's leaving the system. He's the soul that now wants to leave the village, leave the mind control, right? That's one way of looking at it. But then when he enters into the village, all the way through this series, you see, he's always saying that the one thing, in every other aspect of his life, he's collectivized like they are. He's forced to dress the same, he's forced to basically do everything, to all intents and purposes, he is a victim of the village. The only one thing that makes him completely unique and what frustrates his controllers is he just won't tell them the reason for why he resigned. This is, people who've never seen the series, it's just a small anecdote that they just try to, in various ways, abstract from him a simple thing. Why did you resign? They already know he resigned, and they know that he's not one of them, and all they want is this little piece of information, but he doesn't give it to them. What is the meaning of that? It's saying that, look, even if you're in a prison, I've said this in many other talks, even if you actually are chained to a dungeon wall, you can still be free attitudinally. Now this is what McGowan was talking about, and he knew this goes for society. He goes, there's lots of areas of slavery that you really can't do anything about, or if you try to do something about it, you'll only do it in such a ridiculous way that you may further enslave yourself in the web. You may further strangle yourself in the webs, of the web in order to get free. He was aware of this. But he knew, and he was trying to say this in the show by saying he just refuses to tell them the simple reason. All they want to know is, why did you resign? And he won't do it. It's because he's saying, that is my private dominion. If I don't want to tell you, I won't. In other words, fall in love with the word no. You're not obligated to tell everybody your private life. You're not obligated to get even into a conversation with these people. And you don't even have to explain to them why you don't like them or why you won't. So in other words, he won't tell them the answer that they want. And he also won't tell them why he won't give them the answer. That's what he's talking about. The attitudinal freedom. Because you see, here's how this ties into the global village. The global village is actually going to provide you, just like you see in that show, The Prisoner, every other conceivable freedom you could want.
Exactly.
But it won't give you, as I said this in Disciples of the Mysterium article, you won't exist. You will perfectly function. You will perfectly socialize. And you will be perfectly contented. But you won't exist. And you know something? Everyone, I hope not everyone listening to the sound of our voices now, but pretty much everyone that you look out the window and see, they're going to be into it. They're going to be getting in line, because by the time they're so sick of their own emotions, which is what we went into in the Architects of Control DVD, my theories on 2012 are totally not what a lot of, in fact, all of the other guys are into when they talk about 2012. I've always tried to emphasize that 2012 sees the end of mankind. It's the post-human world beginning. Or let's just say beginning with a small b, it's already been happening. But it is the end of every idiom. It's the end of masculinity and femininity as you know it. It's the end of the teens. It's the end of the elders. It's the end of old people as you knew them and what the world that they understood.
Yeah.
But the thing is that we're approaching, again, another carrot and a stick situation. When they build that global village, they will actually give you all the freedom and all the entertainment and all the stimuli that anybody could ever desire. But one thing, but you know something? There's no Black Sabbath song called Lord of this World, and the Satan character who's speaking in the song says, the soul I took from you was not even missed. When the global village gets created and we all enter into it as these smiling depressives, we won't even know that something is left infinitely precious on the gutter outside the walls. We will walk in without even realizing. We'll sacrifice the freedom. We're ready to give it up, and you see that every single day. You can't just keep on pointing to Big Brother going, oh my God, look what they're doing now with the implants, and look what they're doing now with the RFID chips, and look what they're doing now with the surveillance. Look at all these pharmaceutical corporations. Well, you're buying the drugs, aren't you? They didn't force the millions of dollars, billions of dollars out of your pocket. Somebody must be sucking their drugs. Somebody must be just rolling back and letting it all happen.
Yeah. Do you think this is why the deluge took place and the end of the last stage? They were trying to create the ascended man, the carbon, silicon, advanced human.
Yeah. I think their plans went awry. And again, there's that old philosophical question. Was the deluge also was somewhat, these cataclysms in a way sort of helped with the freedom? Because had those not happened and had their plans of these Nephilim not gone awry, well then we wouldn't be talking now. They would have completely genetically interfered with everybody, and we would have been smiling depressives circa 13,500 years ago, or 15,000, whenever the visitation took place, right? So I've always looked at it, I even talk about it as being a variable, that the variable of the earth changes may in fact have been a sort of blessing in disguise, even though it was cataclysmic, because it at least allowed a modicum of freedom. There was a split. And again, I'm not the expert on this subject, where this is something that has to be further looked at, and as we go down through the generations, I just try to put the story as much as I have grasped in that book and DVD. But I think that it could be looked at as the most cataclysmic thing. And again, by the way, this even ties into the very nature of the ego. I talked about this. You can re-script the question you're asking in another way. I talked about it briefly at that Conspiracy Con talk. The ego itself is the most fascinating thing. Because even though the ego's one side of it is leaning towards that collectivism and social persona, in a strict psychological definition, the ego is the only part of us that seeks for differentiation.
Yeah. Exactly. This is why I agree with you on collectivism, and this is what obviously maybe in a future show we can get into in terms of the way of the fool, the ego suffering at certain hermetic paths that people have gone down in terms of initiation and seeking gnosis, basically. So it's a massive area. It would you could talk all day on that one anyway. Very briefly, I must have at least 10 to 15 questions in my inbox. So like I say, we've only had time to cover maybe 5% of what we had in mind before the show. A brief question that I noticed. I'm wondering if you've got any knowledge on this one. Is, do you know what the meditation room at the United Nations could be for?
Yeah, that was tied into the Fabian Society. It's tied into the Baha'i faith. And it's basically this world teacher palava that is another brainchild of this world movement. But the world movement that created the United Nations is ultimately royalistic.